Committee, realising that myself, Mikhail, Robbie, Ben, Liz and Chris sit on that, but Paul is our independent that also sits in that space, so I think he's actually introduced himself to everybody now around the room. For your information, Paul, we also have Councillor Nicol online. I don't think Tip is here, is she? No. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you. Just a little question. Backgrounds, transport. We've done a fair bit. What we do in local government is largely led by me, but not exclusively. So we do the CE partnership stuff, which is what I've been doing with this organisation for quite a while. We advise governors on change, and that's a reasonably healthy business to be in right now. David in particular helps local authorities who are interested in how the hell they can make their infrastructure spend go further. He's just really getting into that business, but a lot of people are interested. After water's gone, the next biggest thing you guys have got is your infrastructure generally, and all local authorities have got is infrastructure, is roading, and there's a lot of interest in how that gets done better. There was nobody here in the room now, other than Chris, was there when I first, and that was doing some governance oversight. So I represented the council at the time as the CEO of the time gave this outfit the last big refresh or restructure or reorganisation that it's had, and that was 2013. I also, for my sins, was right in the middle of the Auckland Transition Agency when they smashed the 8 warring tribes on the isthmus into a single Auckland council, and everybody knows what a howling success that is. Nevertheless, I'll say that it would have been a whole lot worse had it not been done, and everybody's learned a few things that they wouldn't do again. But that was an interesting experience and probably pretty relevant to what lies ahead of you all. I currently do the sort of work I do with you guys with yourselves and I think 3, maybe 4 other councils, and I've worked with a couple in the past, so I know this stuff reasonably well. And I've been working with this council on it since 2013. I've been recycled a couple of times, taken to market, and reappointed after that. So a little bit of scrutiny over what I do, and I'm proud of the relationship and the working relationship I've got with Chris and successive groups of people in this council. So thanks, Dave. I just want to talk. I've rechristened the way I talk about this these days as the CE partnership, because that's actually what it is. And I'm confident in saying that it's probably the most important determinant of your success as governors. You know, you all made promises to people around barbecues. You all got elected because larger groups of people believed you could make those things come true. And without Chris and his organisation, you can't. So the relationship between you and the organisation is a bloody important one for both of you. It sort of shapes the culture of the performance of the organisation and its credibility in the community. And neither of you can deliver if the other one doesn't play their part. Your long-term plans, your budgets, your policies are all going to collapse. You don't have corresponding support from the organisation. And I think it's probably a Christmassy note to say, everyone, I think you need to have some acknowledgement of the stress and the pressure that organisations like this are under right through local government right now. The changing times. Somebody said to me in a bar once that change is coming at local government in New Zealand far faster than it can consume that change, process that change. And I think that's fair. Whether it's a lack of will, skill is another question, but just the overall volume of it is stretching people left, right and centre. So you can make allowances for that perhaps as you head unerringly for what you're here to do, which is get some things done. If I can just talk for a minute about the relative roles, I want to dig deep into this, and this is the classic definition of roles. But my view is that the role of governors changes when you get to certain phases of an organisation's life and evolution and development. And I was thinking about that as I drove up here from Taupo this morning. You're driving past the reasonably slow-moving river as it comes through the gates, and then as I drive on down to Hooker Falls, it's picking up pace. And I think the governance that you provide back at this end of the... I've noticed that, yeah. And the governance that you provide at this end, with the relatively calm flowing waters is a little different to the governance you provide as you get the waterfall. And so this is sort of an overall view, but I'd like to discuss with you a little bit later on how things change when you get clear to the rapids. So on the left-hand side, what's council's role? And I know I'm preaching to the choir. That's the nature of these induction things a little bit. My apologies to the folks who suffered through me saying this 3 years ago, but certainly for the benefit of the new councillors. So, what's council's role? Left-hand side, it's to act collaboratively as you make decisions, and that is a real trip point in my observation for councils, where people have things they promised other folks they would get done. And when you get into the council chamber, you stop being a representative of the people who put you there narrowly, and you all of a sudden have to govern for the whole region. And that's a different hat, isn't it? It's a subtly different hat. So there's a collective element to your role in terms of governing. But your role is to decide what needs doing. Big picture, direction, strategy, priorities, budgets, outcomes, to give clear direction on the big calls. And there are some very big calls coming along now. And my encouragement is, one of my comments, consistent critiques of local government, is that local government is undergoverned, that governors tend to lean too much on their organisations to make the really big calls, get led round by the nose and by the advice. You get all the advice by all means, but in the end, it's your responsibility to make those big calls and go down and hail a gunfire if you get it wrong. That's the job. It's your job to hold the CE accountable, but I want to talk a little bit more about some of the ins and outs of that a bit later on. Not obviously to direct staff or manage day-to-day operations. And I've seen terrible damage done where councillors have misused the opportunity that local government in New Zealand generally gives you to interact with staff. And it's a very valuable thing. I would hate to be Auckland, where you go through, you bluntly can't get access to staff. The informal nature of the way we operate and the luxury of the access to staff is something never to be abused, because it could be taken away and you'd be worse off for it. And I also think just an observation that I'll say at the outset. I've seen in this council, unfortunately, but also in other councils, situation where frustrated councillors will start to take their frustration to the media and out into the wider world. And I encourage councillors to think about it this way. This organisation is your vehicle for getting stuff done. It must be well reputed and have a good brand in your community for it to be respected and able to do the work that it needs to do. And if councillors, out of frustration, find themselves taking pot shots at the organisation in public, it damages the brand, damages the reputation, and damages the organisation's ability to do its stuff. So no one's trying to deny anybody free speech, but if at all possible, you can keep your dirty linen in the chamber or over the teacups, and it never spills out into public. You're weakening the horse that you're relying on to take you to the promised land. So respect the horse. On the other side, you've got Chris's role, which I wouldn't have for all the tea in China. I've got to tell you. I'm going to tell you what he gets paid later on, and I'm going to tell you that that's I wouldn't do it for that money. But anyway, your CE's job is to lead the organisation, manage it, and make sure that it goes the direction you want it to go. You do the where are we going or the what's going to be achieved, and he does the how. And I'll come to some of the subtleties on that a bit later on. He, as you know, statutorily employs everybody else. You've only got one employee, and that's Chris. And it's his job to bring you fair and impartial advice. And I emphasise it the next couple of pages. I think it's also his job to challenge your thinking. That's what you pay him for, to challenge and test your thinking, present the alternative, tell you if he thinks you're going wrong. In the end, you make the call, but you do not want a yes man in that seat. You want somebody who's really going to argue with you, and you've got to make it okay for him to argue. In the end, you make the call and you live by it, but you've got to encourage that argument. I've seen CEs beaten into submission where they simply do what the council tell them. Those councils have made a problem. They made a rod for their own backs. Better you get another CE than you've got somebody who's bludgeoned into compliance. And it's his job to keep you informed but independent, I guess, of the inner workings of the organisation, except in a narrow range of circumstances. So what's the bit in the middle? You've got shared responsibility for the outcomes. You've got to make good calls. He's got to implement them well. You're both involved in, is there a trusting relationship? If he behaves in an untrustworthy way, that damages the ability of the outfit to do things. Similarly, if councillors act in an untrustworthy way, that damages his ability to do your job. So that sits in the middle. Regular information flow has to run both ways. No surprises, no behind the bike sheds stuff, and no interference, unreasonable interference in each other's activities. And your chair is central and key to the happy working relationship. But I also say this because I advise a committee, a subset of you folk who look after Chris, and I think there's a good logic to having a subcommittee. No chief exec can realistically work for a council of 14 people. It's just a dumb model, and I've seen some councils try and pull it off where they say, well, everybody's I'm a councillor and everything comes to me. Sorry, folks, it's a dumb model because you need an environment where a chief executive can come and open the kimono a little bit, share their thinking and their stresses and their worries and everything else. They will never do it with a full chamber of 14 people. You need a small group of senior folks who can be very discreet, who you guys can trust to sit down and have these inner workings conversations with the chief executive, including how you're going, what do you need, what can we do for you, and so he can test his thinking and you can test thinking and explore things. So I'm a great believer that you are the employing entity, and the chair or mayor is an incredibly important figure, but the small subcommittee, in my view of it, is essentially the manager of the chief exec. There are some good checks and balances in there. I've seen situations where you've got a terrible mayor, an absolutely terrible mayor. So if the mayor, the council can't rely that the mayor then is the manager or the boss of the CE, and the whole council, for the reasons I outlined, a bit big. Can that create tensions occasionally? Yes. Is it the best of the various models available to you? I think it is. And I think it served this organisation pretty well, and I'll share with you later on a little bit of the evidence behind why I would say that. So distinct roles, but an overlap, a partnership in the middle. Warren, I'm happy to take questions as we go if there are any, or at the end. So just put that out there. Yep. There's a little bit of a paradox here, and I'm always at some risk of getting fired for saying this, but I'll say it anyway. A good CE serves you, but he also protects the community from you a bit. Some more than others. We're not talking about ourselves, of course, but look, in theory, I think you know the sense in what I'm saying here. Councils come and go. You know, the tide comes in, the tide goes out. The organisation goes on. Those, you know, if you're a district council, those playgrounds, those libraries, those things need to carry on. And councillors, you know, the electorate gets angry and frustrated and expresses an opinion, or it gets of a different mindset and income a group of councillors accordingly. The business fundamentally goes on. And sometimes it's your chief executive's job to say, whoa, you know, with respect, I don't think that makes sense. So you need that pushback. It's healthy. It's the checks and balances built into the system. Pushback isn't defiance. You know, it's stewardship. It's having a care. These are public spirited people with a good sense of what's right and wrong in this. You get to make the calls. So, you know, strong chief execs are going to test your ideas, test your thinking, and strong governors welcome that. The argument is productive. You get the last word, also get the consequences that go with that. That's how the game works. Thanks. So I'll show you the list later on, but Chris has got 11 KPIs for the year. It's rumoured that Chris sleeps with his KPIs under his bed, which is a way of saying he takes them incredibly seriously, and his track record in terms of delivering on the things that he's committed to the council to do is a good one, and I'll show you that later on. The worst thing a council can do is to overburden its organisation and its chief executive. If he has 11 KPIs right now, and you folk have been elected and there are changes that you want to make, then at some point soon, as you turn the aircraft carrier, if you like, you're going to have to have a conversation about, well, what is a sensible number of priorities? What are they going to be? Which of the current ones might make way for some new ones? Because otherwise you are just saying, look, here, you've got 11 and here's another 11 and good luck with that, pal. And we'll shoot you if you fail. Not an inspiring message and not good governance. So my message here, I think, is made, my point is made. You have to find ways to make sure that the ask of the chief executive is clear and manageable, and that they've got the tools to do it. So fewer, clearer priorities beats additional items piled on the top. And let's also remember that you aren't the only ones putting things in Chris's in tray. There are some folks in Wellington who are doing a pretty heroic job of filling the in tray as well. So good governance is about clear direction.
We've got a question there, Paul, Gary.
So that's great, but then isn't that the only way the council can turn the aircraft carrier around, as you put it? You know, because management all stay in place, CE stays in place, and the councillors change. And if you don't put those key KPIs in place and say, you know, Chris needs to deliver on it, the aircraft carrier is going to keep going in the same direction. You're not going to make any change. So that's our only tool, isn't it?
I agree. So, sorry. This is what I meant to say, that conversation needs to be had about what are the new directions, the new course for the aircraft carrier, and an accommodation needs to be made that some current things might have to slip off the table. So he can expect clear direction from you folk. And if it is that we're going to go 30 degrees west of where we were, that's fine. It's just that you can't ask him to do that and at the same time be heading in another direction. So you've got to rationalise it. That's my only point. And limit it. My only point. Yes, it is.
Guys, use the mic. We've got people online if you're going to carry on the conversation.
Sorry. Yeah, but it is our, you know, we've got very clear, you know, and so if we don't like the other 11 priorities, and I suppose the question would be then, I'm not saying this will happen, but could you see in a situation where we drop the 11 priorities, so we don't want to do a 30-degree turn, we want to do a 180, you know, would that be something that the chief executive would say, just, I'm out of here, or, you know, can
He'd
you
have
answer
to
that sort of scenario?
He'd have to speak for himself on that. I'll say this to you, that I think that you've got a chief executive with a fair bit of integrity, and if he didn't believe he could go the direction you wanted to go, I suspect he'd tell you. I also think that councils have got to decide, do we have, and it's a point I'll make in a minute, do you have the right CE for the times? You know, because some CEs are great maintainers and others are great changers, and the changers aren't great maintainers and vice versa. So there's you know, what's the task? Who's the ideal person for it? But it's absolutely open to you to change the direction entirely if that's what you collectively wish to do. I'm just saying, however you do it, there has to be clear direction. And if it's an enormous magnitude of change, I think it's fair enough to say, are you up for this?
By agreement only, though.
No, in the end, no.
Can you explain that then, please? Sorry.
Sure. So it's analogous to just about any business, right? Where you hire someone to run the business for you. In the end, you get to make the calls. Stop. So one council agreed a set of priorities. You now are another council free to establish your own set of priorities. It isn't in the end a negotiation where you can only proceed with your agenda if you get full agreement from the chief exec. How that plays out is how it plays out. But
I think, Paul, what Noel might have been alluding to is that there's a process to go through to agree, negotiate that change in direction, whatever. Because they've got to, for all the reasons you just said, they've got to be doable, they've got to be achievable, and the consequences of that have got to be understood and agreed. And I think that's what...
First prize is agreement, Noel, but you, in the end, it's a governor's prerogative to set the direction.
We can set the direction. Can we continue? You have
Please.
we can set the direction, and there's a new group. We can say, sorry, that's no longer the focus. We're going here. Chief executive can say, yes, I agree, happy to change, or no, and I'm out of here. It's as simple as that, isn't it? There's a negotiation whether you accept or not. Yeah. And then or he says, okay, I'll try that. And if I don't like it, well, I can still leave. Yeah. I'm not suggesting that's what.
I'd rather not do more of this in an open forum, just in terms of where this goes.
I was mindful of who is there. We have got no other staff in the room.
It is being recorded. It is a workshop. Yep.
Okay.
We have a public excluded piece of it later.
Sorry, I thought it was public excluded this session.
Keith, and then I think Mikhail had a...
Yeah, Paul, just a quick question. How many KPIs would you give a chief executive of this sort of business?
Well, the last council in its wisdom had 11. Chris didn't, hang on, and every councillor in the room agreed to every full stop in that, right? So, sorry? Well, in the end voted for them. In the end voted. No, I don't remember anyone voting against, but anyway. How many is ideal? I don't see a problem with the number that you've got. I don't think life would be radically different if, for example, you dropped it to half that. I don't think it would. I think that you rapidly get to a situation where it's too many if you go past 11, because you just said about confusion and you're going to run into contradictions. So I also think probably that if this council had a look at the 11, you might say, look, we've got some other things we're interested in. We'd happily drop off 2 or 3 things that are in there now to make space for that. So I think that's a good debate to have. But look, 11's, read a textbook, it'll say 7. In the end, 11.
Chris,
that is not the reason if there's a failure. It's not that there were too many.
Just in history, and Paul will remember this better than I do because he can go back further with CE KPIs, but when I became chief executive, it was kind of midterm through a CE's year with KPIs. What I was what I inherited, I think, were 28 KPIs with about 14 subpoints, which gave me about 42. And from my point of view, a lot of them are kind of like pet projects where pet interests would be the thing to say. So it was an accumulation of kind of nearly everybody's interests around the table, themselves reflected in it. With Paul, we worked through that. I think there'd been a bit of a report saying that there needs to be some more strategic focus. A lot of them were quite low-level operational. They weren't all, but a number of them were type matters. There's been a bit of discussion around the table. What's that mix of operational, like do your business properly, live within your budget, you know, whatever direction that goes, versus what is council committed to with the community from a strategic outcome point of view, and how can we make sure we achieve it? And I think you can probably make some comment around that. There's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it, around that?
Yeah, there is. Look, the reason the numbers creep up, since you asked, Keith, is because through the process, some councillors won't let go of a wish they've got, and their votes needed to get the thing through in the end, and it shouldn't, but it finds its way into that list. So there's a pet project or two. I think we've been pretty good at avoiding that. I think also it's good if there's a balance. I think some of it has to do with the health of the organisation, your horse, you know, and the inner workings of it. So, for example, you've got one there about, and Chris could speak to this passionately for half an hour. The very first one there is that you've not got the yield you hope to get from the Infor system, and therefore a KPI was to get that system working better. And then later on, you've got we want to achieve an 80% plus on delivery of a range of CapEx projects. So there's a little bit of a balance. Some of them is, and there are a couple. There's one in there about the structure of the organisation and the ICM review and that sort of thing. So it's a bit of a balance of making the organisation stronger, delivering some stuff from your high priority stuff from an annual plan, and then there's the odd strategic thing creeps in there as well. So, but that's a conversation I imagine we'll have when you turn your minds to what you think that KPIs should be, and what changes you might want to see to what's in place at the moment.
Well, I'll just go. Tipper, did you have a question online?
I did. Paul, tēnā koe. Been with you since 2013, mate. You've aged us.
You have.
But probably
Yeah.
one learning, if I can contribute to the rest of my colleagues, was the KPIs that were partnered outcomes. We often in council, we overestimate our influence when we need 2 or 3 other players to make something happen. So advise us against those kind of ones. As long as we're only accounting for the CE's role for our portion, but often it was over projects that required other stakeholders. So let's not do that. And to your question, I think it was Keith, what's the ultimate? I think we would need your help this time, Paul, to keep them very tight and specific given the new parameters around our sector.
Yeah.
We need some transition priorities as well as some got to get done stuff, if you know what I mean. That's just all I'd like to contribute at this point. Kia ora.
Thanks, Tipper.
Thanks, Tipper. If I can just make one comment, Tipper, and yeah, I want to acknowledge, sorry, I didn't see you in the room. You're right. I think you have been here for probably longer than anybody else. This balance between, some people will say that you can't give the chief executive responsibility for something they don't control. And that sounds logical, but actually it's utterly impractical. There's almost nothing you could ask him to do that doesn't involve somebody else collaborating, right? And you get stuff done through effective collaboration with a wide range of external stakeholders. So sometimes if you want to put real impetus into his working on something, you do put yourself hostage in the hands of the other party who may or may not want to collaborate or be able to collaborate at the rate you want to. I think you just have to review it and say, did Chris do everything he conceivably could have done to push our interests in that direction? And if the answer is yes, he's done well.
Yeah.
If the answer is no, then gee whiz, what can we learn? How can we do that better? Are you comfortable with that, Tipper?
I'm comfortable with that. It's just where we overplay our role that we should have been able to achieve a partnered outcome, and therefore it becomes this failure of the CE, long as we guesstimate that right. But my second point was probably more more important that when we come to do KPIs, and I think we should attend to that sooner than later, that we do clarify the transition, the ones needed for transition as opposed to those for BAU or, progressing the work of council. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ben, did you?
Yeah, just to clarify, so currently we're in the 25 to 26 annual plan. Is that correct? So while we might direct you to do stuff, you've got to have funding and budgets to do the things we need you to do. So if we're making changes in December 2025, that's halfway through an annual plan, which has already been locked in. Is that correct? So really the real chance for change begins on 1st of July 26 when you're starting the long-term plan. Is that appropriate or not? Just to clarify what the funding things are and processes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no,
Yeah, that's correct. It doesn't mean that if there was a very strong desire that to change the KPIs now, that you might not want to look at reprioritising where some of the budget spenders. That the awkward bit would be if there's been consultation or there's been some sort of community expectation already set. That would just up the ante on yourselves having to be accountable for that change. The other slightly related comment I'd make is that you're right, we're halfway through the year already. We've already set a lot of the, in terms of the priorities, we've put the systems in place, we've put some of the expenditure in place, which might be harder to unwind, especially when there's some which have got, 31st of March delivery dates, those sort of things. But nothing's impossible.
Yeah, and my comment to that was it might be messy, but it's your prerogative to do it.
Do you want to comment now?
Well, I want to pose a question, and I'm not advocating this position. I just want to make that clear because this is public. But would it be worthwhile contemplating doing the right thing because we've got no what's the word? Mandate beyond our time here, so we're not going to be judged by the electorate in the future. So have we got the opportunity with the new KPIs to get the chief executive to do things that we really want him to do without recourse to the community? Now, as I said, I'll pose this as a probably devil's advocate as opposed to actually agreeing with the position, but I could be persuaded if they had merit in it.
If that's not the 6 o'clock news tonight, I'd be very surprised. It's going to have to be a busy news day to beat that.
I think from what I'm hearing, Paul has outlined that the end responsibility comes down to us, what we set and how we set them and timeframes, etc., etc. So we have that ability. The thinking behind it, which you just touched on, that would be decided around the table. So
reality is, I wouldn't go down that track, but I just wanted to throw it in the room.
I'm sure it's in a lot of people's minds around the place. Chris.
Well, I'm going to probably shouldn't be saying because we're not in public excluded, but I'm going to throw my threepence worth in anyway. Noel, as far as I'm concerned, we've been elected to do a job. We went out there and campaigned hard to get people elected who we believe have got a like mind, and we got a majority. I think we've got a responsibility to those people that have put us here to deliver on that. And sitting around here for 2 years waiting to be booted out is no way of doing that. So we've got, to my mind anyway, and I'll be coming in seeking support from around the table, we need to take action sooner rather than later to achieve the things that we set out and said we would do as part of our campaign policies. So that's where I sit on it, and happy to listen to other people, but I actually feel quite strongly about that. We've been given a job to do, and sitting here and doing nothing for 2 years is not an option.
And like, I agree, and that's why some of us are working on the water issues within council. I think we're all on the same page. We just might as well get onto it sooner rather than later.
I just was, I'm going to endorse what Chris said. Allergy that Paul's used is the aircraft carrier that we want to change the direction. It could be 180 or 360. The thing is that aircraft carrier's got 15 people in it and there's only one parachute. It's got Chris, it's got Chris McKay's parachute on it. None of us have. So, you know, we've got to do what we've got to do, what we've elected in here, no matter what happens, you know, because we don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Right,
Want to move on, Gary? Quick. The lights on.
No,
Means you want to talk? No? Cool. Back to Paul.
Thank you. Dave? Right, not at all. I think you know me and my appetite, but which is to support. So look, there's a lot made of this line between governance and management, and I'd just like to talk about that for a minute and give you my take on it, because I actually think it's a line that moves. And everybody talks about the kitchen. You know, governors shouldn't get into the kitchen. I disagree. I would say this, that it's your kitchen, but you need to enter it wisely. And let me explain myself a little bit. I think you own the kitchen, but you don't run it day to day. You delegate that to Chris to run. And I think that there's a governance management boundary, a bit like a kitchen. You own it, CE runs it. You set the direction, the CE implements. But, and here's I think the but. As good governors, if you see smoke coming out of the kitchen, or you sense there's something fundamentally wrong with the arrangement, your responsibilities change, I think. Those responsibilities are to, I'll stick with the smoke for a minute. Make sure the CEO knows there's smoke. Make sure he's diagnosed where the smoke's coming from, what it's about. Make sure he's got a good plan to put this fire out and get the kitchen up and running again, and monitor that plan to make sure it works. And if you don't like any one of those things in that chain, you get a say about it. Because in the end, it's your kitchen. So while things are running well and it's delivering and the customers are fine, that's one thing. But if you get to a situation where, you know, there's force majeure, there are big forces at work, or there's trouble in the kitchen, then, you know, my view is that, and I'm not alone in this at all, good governance is about being more active, taking in and inquiring and getting into the weeds, into the kitchen. So.
How wrong? Come on. I've got a Keith.
Yep. So Paul, I like your analogy. And when you smell smoke, you ask questions. Now, I have a problem, and this is not directed at you, Warren, but I'll use it as the example. So sometimes you smell smoke, but you don't know the full content of it. And so Warren challenged me the other day, and it was a rightful challenge in terms of get us some facts. Now, sometimes you've got to go on your gut. You know, any of us who run a business, you go on gut, and then quietly you get into it. So in terms of the smoke and the challenge, you know, me individually, I don't have the resources to dig deep into a 500 person operation, or 600 or whatever Chris's and thing, nor do any one of us. So if I smell smoke and I trust my gut, how do we deal with that situation?
So Chris can probably help you with this as well, but here's my tuppence worth. Let's say a ratepayer brings you and says, I'm experiencing some ridiculous outputs, behaviours, whatever it might be. I think we're all wise enough to not take that automatically at face value and full strength, and run to Chris with it. I think we owe it to ourselves and everybody else to check our facts, be damn sure, and get that person to document, find out whether other people that feel the same, and then it'll take shape and you can do something with that. So I think first thing is investigate it. Second thing I think is just ask questions. And I think that you've got fellow councillors around here who could give you a really good read if you felt you were smelling something. If they can smell it too, 3 or 4 or 5 of you can smell it. It's probably something there. And then I think Chris, my experience of Chris, he is extraordinarily open to being asked about these things, and he'll give you a very honest response, and or connect you with whoever's the lead person in the organisation about that. I shouldn't say this with you here, but I've never known him to get in the way, those sorts of things. Others can speak to that, but I think that's generally how I'd say to go about it. So don't pick up the spatula, ask the questions, get the answers, but then follow it all the way through. It's not a one shot and done. Hey, Chris, a bit worried about that. Can you check it out and sort it out? That's not good governance, is it? Good governance is if it's a significant thing to you, then tell us whether there was a problem. Tell us what the problem was. Tell us what you're going to do about it, and then let's make sure that it's fixed. Tell us when it's fixed. And you scale that obviously for the size of the thing in front of you. But the Infor would now be an example where, to my mind, just thinking about it, where some smoke appeared to governors. They've investigated it, decided that actually this thing isn't delivering according to the specs, and so you're riding it quite hard until it does start to deliver according to the specs. Seems like a reasonably good example.
Or it implodes.
Robbie.
Yeah. Well, my issue is going back to what Keith is saying, that I own the kitchen, I can smell the smoke. I've been told that it's on fire, but now we're in the situation where some of us are getting told that we're not allowed to open the door to our kitchen to see what's going on.
So you need to qualify that.
I'm not gonna put names to people.
No, but qualify the situation, because that means nothing to me, and I'm not sure whether it means.
Well,
much.
that's a fib, because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
But using the open the door analogy is so, or leave it to public excluded.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yep, Ben.
I think your kitchen analogy is very good, but the trouble is, along with 10 other regional kitchens, we're about to be under statutory management. And I think the point that Tipper's made is important, that we also need to look towards a transition, because we've got half an annual plan and one long-term plan to do, and then we're out, and the chef is now running the ship completely. It's like, well, with under new management. So I think the timeframes are compressed, and the idea of transition, I think, is also important to include, because, yeah.
Need more money.
Well, but the point you made earlier, you get the last word as governors and the consequences, but the consequences of electoral disappearance are no longer there. We're disappearing anyway. So, yeah.
So Ben, can I just qualify that? I believe that we just need to have a long-term view that we're here for another 2 years. And in that process, there's a strategic direction, there's KPIs, there's that sort of stuff to run through. So that's what we need to focus on. That's where we want to achieve some things that we've set out in the public, etc. So that's the view. We can't worry what's on the horizon and what running the organisation and who sets Chris's KPIs are in 2, 3 or 4 years' time. We've got 2 years, let's call it 2 years. Who knows? Might end up 3, it might end up 1.5. But we need to be going through this process. We need to be very shortly looking at Chris's KPI, and in that space. We've got a CEERC committee. This is what this discussion is around, responsibilities and how that all works. So that's the way we need to look at it going forward. Forget about what's on the horizon. It's got to be front of mind without a doubt, but it's also, we've still got processes to work through. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Chris, did you have something? No. Later? Okay. Yeah. Gary Maguire and then Gary Ronan.
Yeah, as a newbie coming in here, what I see is that thought it could have been real short, but it may be longer now, and well, it's looking like being longer. But my intention now would be to make sure that we we govern with common sense and set the framework there now in line with what we're told is going to follow on anyway. And my judgment, I've seen good and bad CEOs, and to have a CE that puts the work into making what happened what the committee of the day is, and I think that Chris is very good at that. That's my gut feeling. So yeah, I look forward to seeing where we go with this, Chris. Got my support.
Gary.
Yeah, Warren, look, I just like to endorse what you were saying, because I've got no time for short-term thinking, and you know that this might be gone. So for me, it's business as usual, and we as a council have a responsibility to leave this place in a better space than what we arrived at, and that will be my focus for whatever time it takes. Absolute.
Yeah.
There is one thing that's, I agree with everything that's said, by the way. There's one thing that's a little bit different and unusual about the situation now, and it's not that what is the limited future or whatever of governance of this organisation. It's to do the fact that the government's just dropping more stuff on us as we speak, and that's just a little bit unusual, because my advice is, and it would be that when we get into formal settings where the committee is actually operating and KPIs are being discussed, we have to have a look at that landscape, because that, whilst what you're thinking today might be most important, there might be something just around the corner, because we know it's coming, we know it's imminent. Some of it was last week, some of it's this week, some of it's next week, and some of it's the week after. And I think that's, Paul, it's kind of an unusual situation in that respect. It would be a lot simpler if it was just an acquisition merger discussion. You know, how do you work in that environment? It's not that. It's a changing landscape, and I think that together we'll all have a look at that and think, right, now what do we put in place to work through it?
If I could say one more thing about organisations going through times of great change. Turn your mind to the idea of what are your no regrets moves. And what I mean by that are things that are consistent with the stars you're steering by, what you feel is your mandate. But if you think about the future, roll your minds forward, they are highly unlikely to make a problem for you. Because there'll be some things that you can do here that there's almost no version of the future that the thing you're doing now will be a problem. I mean, some of the work that you do is a question about who will do it, but it will be done by somebody. And if you set it up so that work is done better now, better in future, the near future than it was when you took office, that's a no regrets move. I think it's a good concept to get your head around, because you'll be able to put some things to one side and go, I just can't figure out what the future of that might be. Therefore, I'm not sure I want to touch it because I might make it worse. But there is some stuff that will stick out, probably core stuff. You guys, we could work on that all day long. And the future generations of mayors, let's say, will just thank us for it, because they would want that done too. And there's also the possibility, you know, just getting off my subject here a little bit, of some degree of consultation about some moves that you're thinking of making with some of the folks who might be the new governors. I mean, this is the most unusual acquisition you're ever going to find, where, you know, I've done a lot of merger and acquisition stuff in the private sector, and there's an obligation on the board of you folk, who are the company that's being acquired, to run it within tramlines provided to you by the people who bought it. And they bought it to do certain things with it. And they will have an interest, you know, they want you to run it until the day they hand over the money and take it. But they want you to do it in a way that won't bugger up the investment they're making. It's pretty hard to read for you right now, isn't it? You might have a hunch that some of those people probably want the same broad outcomes as you do, but it's kind of hard to unpiddle it. But there is a way through it. Anyway,
Chris.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on that point that you made then, Paul, which I think is an excellent point. And I say that because we know we've got new legislation which is going to be in Parliament next week or week after, whenever. that's going to provide a total new direction, or potentially a total new direction and sense of activity that this organisation is going to be involved in. But we have to be fast enough on our feet to be able to support the chief executive and make the changes that are necessary internally to pick up on the new legislation, which we know will be in place sometime next year. So, you know, I think it is an excellent point, and so I'm just saying thanks for making it.
Thank you.
I think the council's got to give CEERC the mandate to join with the chief executive, and once those changes are known, that's to actually absolute reset if required. There's no question about it. How do you feel about that, Chris?
I think that's what I said just before.
Yeah. All right, let's move this on, guys, because if we want to drop in, I think that everyone's looking for a hard stop at 2:30. So if we wanted to drop into public excluded, it needs to happen in the not too distant future. But happy for Paul to work through the rest of the slides as he wishes.
Yeah, no, I'm not famous for long slide presentations, and I won't disappoint today. Thanks, Dave. So I just want to emphasise trust because through a period of great uncertainty, the people you turn to are the people you can trust, and the importance of that here between you and Chris. You know, it's the currency. It's hard to earn and it's easily wasted. What builds it in situations like this is being clear with each other, being consistent, being reliable, doing what you say you'll do, and having a shared purpose, and building that shared purpose as soon as you can. What breaks it? Surprises. You know, the one absolute obligation on chief executive is not to surprise you, and to make sure that you know. Similarly with you to him, leaks, unfiltered frustration, particularly out in public, and the sort of corridor commentary. I've never known Chris to shy away from feedback about anything, and I think that you get a far better result from him if you're blunt and direct as you can be, and he'll give it back to you despite his calm demeanour. And I think every councillor contributes to that. That's another thing to be aware of. You know, you see the damage to a council in general and its brand of one rogue councillor. You've been through it here, so stay together would be my advice. Thanks, Dave. So the next thing, and this is just a refresh for the councillors who've been here before, and this is how we have done it in the past for the new councillors. You might have an ambition to manage your CEO well. It takes some systems to do it, and we've got some. So you've got the subcommittee called CEERC, which leads the KPI setting. But the council approves the KPIs, and we've got a process for harvesting each councillor's sense of what the CE's priorities might be, massaging those to the point where we get them down to a manageable number, and then having a good discussion on them in the chamber. And Robbie, you're quite right. Not everybody agreed with everything, but by and large, people were heard on the way to coming to a consensus number. Chris influences those at the outset, but in the end, and first prize is always that you and your CE agree on the targets, agree on the goals, because they're much more motivated that way if they agree to them. But in the end, you can direct him to hire half the people in the outfit, and he has two choices: resign or do it. Once he's given you all the advice. So ultimately, you guys hold the cards. The second routine that we've got here is quarterly reviews. So once a quarter, Chris will come to the CEERC and we'll give a pretty comprehensive report on traffic light report with backup on how he's going on the various elements of the KPIs. And it always amuses me, people say, oh, there's too much in here, till such time as they find out there isn't a date or there isn't a specific deliverable by that date, and then they grizzle like hell about, oh, they're all vague. So there is a bit in here, and Chris's reporting is pretty fastidious on it. But it's the environment where he'll come along and say, look, we got a surprise on this one. So-and-so, Tipper, to your point, so-and-so partner hasn't fronted up in the time we hoped. We're running late on this one. Can I have an easement in time? In other words, can we extend the date for delivery? And the committee then will decide whether it will grant that extension or it won't. It will take more time to do that thing, whether you grant the extension or not. But it's quite an important signal to a CE to say, look, actually, we think you could have anticipated that, and work past it rather than it be the obstacle it is. So there's that process. These are living things, is my point, which is good news given the changes that you currently want to make. But once a quarter, he presents, progress is assessed, a report on that goes to council. Annually, through the year, Chris also brings reports on various aspects of the organisation's health that don't have another committee to go to. So things like succession planning. You know, are we doing some decent succession planning here? What's the people strategy for the organisation? How are we going with the culture in the organisation? Is it the culture that we want to have? So he presents on that to this committee, and that's been found to be useful in the past. If he's got something he's planning, for example, if I can go back to the ICM review, the committee heard early and a bit more what he was thinking of doing, and they had some hand in shaping that in terms of reference and that sort of. So there's an element. It's a safe place for the chief exec to come and share some stuff. That committee leads. Sorry, is that a quick? Oh, the mic drop moment. That committee leads Chris's annual review, which briefly consists of a self-assessment from Chris, tasking me to go and talk to a number of external stakeholders. One or two of them are now in the room, and also to talk to a number of the exec and to pull that feedback from the various sources together and knit that into a recommendation to CEERC or an assessment for CEERC of Chris's performance for the year, and a remuneration review recommendation, which all comes to council to be debated and approved. And that committee also looks after, though we've been heroically unsuccessful, looks after efforts to find professional development for Chris. Bluntly, is Mikkel kicks me about that every time we talk, but we haven't been successful with that. Chris has been very busy. Yeah, exactly. So look, that's the work of the committee, and thank you, Dave. Go past that, thank you. Come to the end. So look, just as we close out this part of the conversation, it's a partnership. It comes down to three things. You've got to trust your CE is doing the best for you. I think there's historic reason for doing that. You've got to respect his craft, his magic, but also the constraints he operates under, and be open-eared when he asks for resource, which is the third point. You've got to enable his success through giving him clarity and giving him support. That's all I really wanted to say in this part. Any questions?
Right, we'll move into the public excluded.
Alrighty, so just to provide an overview to close off this portion, we will move this workshop into public excluded because you are going to discuss matters pertinent to the Chief Executive's employment, and that is done under Lagoima, section 7.2a, which is to protect the privacy of natural persons, including those of deceased natural persons, which does not apply here today, obviously. No moving, no, we're all done. So if you just give me a minute, we'll be good to go. What I will possibly point